steal water, light, and cable lines from the utility companies, the rest of us have to pay the price by way of higher bills. There is risk of fire, personal injury, death, or imprisonment for you and those around you. You set a poor example for your family. How can we make it better if we don't do better? Would you want someone stealing from you? Do the right thing. Just pay for it. A message from the Office of Utilities Regulation.
The OUR is here to regulate the operation. When you want the light and power, your internet and phone. The OUR is here to get you to know your rights.
The OUR is here to regulate the public utilities operate. Water, light, phone, and internet. The OUR keep them in check.
Contact us at 1-888-CALL-OUR, the Office of Utilities Regulation. OUR, regulating utilities for the benefit of all.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us on this important webinar as we discuss the topic, Do the Right Thing, How Theft Impacts Your Utility Service. My name is Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, and I'm the Public Education Specialist at the Office of Utilities Regulation. It is an issue which we have long grappled with in Jamaica, the theft of utility services and equipment. It impacts all the major utility companies in Jamaica and just as significantly, all of us as customers. How significant is the problem and what can be done to curtail it once and for all? What are your thoughts on what needs to be done? For JPS and NWC, the main problem is theft of light and water and equipment. For Digicel and Flow, theft of equipment and fuel. Whatever the nature of the stealing, it is costing them millions of dollars and it is impacting the service we receive and how much we pay. To discuss this important issue, we have joining us today representatives of the 4 major utility companies, and I will introduce them at this point. To my immediate right, Rashid Anderson is Director of Losses, Operations and Analytics at Jamaica Public Service Company Limited. Welcome, Rashid.
Thank you.
Beside Rashid, we have Anthony Barrows, who is Group Head of Field Operations Management at Digicel. Welcome, Anthony. And beside Anthony, we have Flo. Keon Mitchell is the Director of Corporate Communications and Stakeholder Management. Welcome, Keon.
Thank you, Liz.
And not to be outdone, Charles Buchanan, Corporate Public Relations Manager at the National Water Commission.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks.
And of course, welcome to you joining us on Facebook, on our Facebook page, and on our YouTube channel. The format for today's webinar is as follows. We'll first have very short presentations from our 4 panelists as they talk about the issues and how it impacts them and their customers. Then a discussion segment where we will also invite you to text in any questions and comments and perhaps suggestions, because we want to hear from you today about how we can really significantly and in a very impactful way address this issue that's plaguing us. So you can make your comments via our YouTube page or our Facebook page. And of course, we have set up a special WhatsApp number for you, and that number is 876-316-2647. That's 876-316-2647. We will repeat those numbers as we go along. But without further ado, I invite Rashid Anderson of JPS to make the first presentation. Rashid.
Thank you very much, Liz. And a pleasant good afternoon to our viewers. So at this time, I am going to just talk to you a little bit about electricity theft and how it impacts our utility and how it impacts you. So to put things in context, we have approximately 600,000 legitimate customers connected to our grid. And there's an estimated 200,000 households and commercial entities that are stealing. So you get a broad idea of what we're grappling with. So if you look also on the national scale, we have been importing oil that have been burning and just been generating for those persons who are stealing electricity. The utility company expends $70 million on average per year. And also to put it in context, that represents a million barrels of oil that we import for persons who are stealing electricity. A very important point that I would like to make is the fact that electricity theft is unsafe. It can result in injury, loss of property, and most importantly, loss of lives. The utility cannot undergo this type of theft and provide power in a safe and reliable manner. When persons steal electricity, it impacts the quality and the reliability of our power. It damages equipment that are essential to serving you, and we have seen it in many instances where persons are sometimes even out of power due to persons stealing from us. And another one that hits home is the fact that it causes the cost of the electricity to be be expensive, more expensive than it could be. So those are some of the real heavy impacts of electricity theft. You may ask, so Rashid, who steals? Is it just the persons in the inner cities? Is it persons uptown? Do we have commercial persons stealing? And I want to tell you that we have found persons stealing from all geographic, social, and economic groups. The rich, the poor, affluent communities, urban, rural. We have found electricity theft prevalent throughout society. Very quickly, I'm just going to give you an overview, some pictorial to show you what has happened, what is happening in terms of persons stealing. So there are two major ways in which persons steal. They either tamper with the meter or bypass the meter in some way. So when persons tamper with the meter, what they actually do is open the meter and tamper with the electronics within the meter to cause the meter to under-register. For the bypasses, you'll find that persons are very creative. And the picture that you'll see on your screen shows a bypass that is found inbuilt inside the wall of a household. So persons have been creative in bypassing the JPS meter. This one shows a conduit that persons actually bore the conduit and bypass the meter through this mechanism. You have persons who also go directly within the meter socket and create their bypasses there. Then you have persons who use more sophisticated means, additional devices such as switch contactors and the like, and they hide it in some places. You see a picture here on your left, in the bathroom, you find it in the roof, in a manhole. They're very clever and very, very ingenious in how they actually steal electricity. So as we continue, we'll have some further discussions on how it will impact you.
Thank you very much, Rashid. Very startling images and, of course, some startling statistics by the Jamaica Public Service Company. 200,000 households, JPS estimates, households and commercial businesses who are stealing electricity. And not a good figure for us certainly to be proud of as a nation. We're now going to hear from the National Water Commission. Charles Buchanan is Corporate Public Relations Manager. Charles.
Thank you very much. May I just say thanks to the Office of Utilities Regulation for hosting this very important forum, because for the National Water Commission, the issue of theft is a very significant and pervasive problem. Water supply systems, by their very nature, are exposed to and vulnerable to theft. We categorize the instances of theft affecting our operations in probably four main ways. One, infrastructure theft. We have instances where pipes are stolen, cables, motors, pumps, meters. With 11,000 kilometers of pipeline stretching across Jamaica, some in very remote areas, it is relatively easy for persons to attack and remove segments of that pipeline. And unlike in the case of a sister utility, when there is a risk of being harmed by breaking into their network, there is little risk of damage from breaking into a pipe supply network. We have significant issues in relation to electrical stations where either from our side or from our service provider side, in the way of persons getting the power to our locations, the power is stolen and our ability to provide services interrupted. We have theft from our employees and workers and creating significant issues in our ability to work in several areas. We have significant issues of theft in terms of watershed and related thefts. Just 2 years ago, we had major challenges where someone actually went to cut down significant parts of the lumber from the Hermitage watershed. That continues to be an issue for us, not being able to utilize parts of our network. And theft of service or theft of supplies, which is perhaps the one that most people would think of. In this regard, we continue to see issues in relation to illegal connections and second supplies, meter tampering and meter bypasses, illegal use of water from hydrants, use of NWC supplied water for irrigation by breaking into our mains, and illegal commercial and other types of consumption. Generally, the problem is seen as significant, representing anywhere from 12% to 30% of the water that is produced by the NWC is estimated to be stolen. This represents a significant number of accounts. We estimate anywhere between 250,000 to 300,000 connections are involved in the theft of water all across the country. It cuts across all social classes and areas island-wide, like in the case of the JPSCO. But we need to make the point that it thrives in areas of informality and areas in which the law is not strongly enforced. We also need to make the point that water theft and delinquency generally are crimes punishable by law, and together they often work very closely. Delinquency from persons who once were customers of the National Water Commission, as well as persons who have never had any connections, legal connections with the utility. Water theft increases wastage and increases water demand. We have issues of theft threatening the integrity of the infrastructure. It prevents us from delivering the kinds of quality of service that we wish to give to our customers, and it serves as a deterrent or retardant to economic and social development. I make the point also that although affordability may indeed be a factor in the incidence of water theft across the country, it is not, may I repeat, it is not the most significant factor. And there are serious issues which need to be attended to as we discuss this matter further.
Thank you very much, Charles. So, like the JPS, the NWC is also reporting that there are a significant number of customers who are stealing water. More significantly as well, Charles is saying poverty is really not the main motivating factor. We're going to explore that a little later because that's a little worrying for me. So from the main utilities, we go to the telecommunications sector, where you think theft is not an issue, it is just as significant. So we now have Keon Mitchell, Director of Corporate Communications and Stakeholder Management from Flow, who will be talking about the situation facing that company.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by firstly commending the OUR for hosting this session. It's critical that we continue to highlight the challenges that utilities and providers face with regard to the theft of our infrastructure, theft and vandalism, and also for our customers right across the breadth of the island to understand how this impacts them, because it's really not a utility problem or a provider problem. It's really an issue that's facing all of us and impacting all of us as Jamaicans. So in our case here at Flow, we're no strangers to the attacks on our network infrastructure and, of course, the theft of our network elements. Just to give some context in terms of some of the items that are being targeted, cables, and a lot of times you'll hear us airing PSAs speaking about the vandalism of our network, and a lot of persons will think that this is strictly related to cables. But we also have vandalism of our generators. We have theft of our batteries. We also have fuel theft. And all of these elements combined impact on the service delivery to our customers. So to give you a clear picture of what is happening with regard to infrastructure theft and vandalism at Flow, let's look at the numbers. So for the period 2015 through to the end of 2016, our restoration costs were in the region of $6 million US. Year to date, meaning from January up to this point in 2018, we have 51 communities currently impacted by vandalism and theft. This means that a lot of these communities are without services. And then if we look at the restoration costs in terms of what it's going to cost us to restore services to those areas, we are now in the region of $1.9 million US. So it's very clear that this is a significant issue and has a major impact on us financially. Overall, however, the point must be made that while we have so many incidents of vandalism, we continue to see low conviction rates. And that, again, is a serious concern for us. Because if the activity itself and bringing persons through to the courts, etc., if the sentences are not sufficient to act as a deterrent, we will continue to see the repeated cases of vandalism and theft on our network. Let us have a look now at the impact on our customers, on the country, and on the company. So from a company perspective, of course, we have increased restoration costs. We have our reputational damage. We also have the asset protection program that we have to put in place in terms of securing our network. We have a 24/7 monitoring mechanism in our company, just ensuring that everything stays in order, that we're not seeing outages as a result of vandalism, and where those happen, we're able to respond quickly. From a country perspective, we're looking at the loss of communication to the emergency services. Communities are left in the dark, unable to contact the police, ambulances, to call for a fire truck to out a fire. This, again, is a significant issue. And one of the things we want to highlight here is that a lot of times when we have these outages, we also will have the possibility of increased criminal activity. Because these persons, they know you're unable to call for help as quickly as you normally would. And so they take advantage of the downtime in terms of when you're without service. We also lose connectivity in the education sector. Our children, they go to school, they're unable to do research. Our teachers, the educators out there, the researchers are unable to access the resources that are online to help them with their work. We also have the impact on you individually. We look at the case of communities unable to communicate with each other, loved ones, businesses unable to conduct their transactions, unable to go online, the impact on e-commerce. We also look at the fact that they're unable to communicate with their customers. So it's really a widespread problem for us. And if we talk about the customer impact, looking at the parishes, what you should be seeing on your screen now is just a sample of some of the communities impacted, and you're going to see that right now, as we said before, a total of 51 communities without service. And you'll note that St. Catherine alone has 23 of those communities. So we know where we have the hot spots, we know where we have the challenges, and we have to ensure that we have our team on standby, a vigilant, highly skilled team that is ready to respond when we do have these instances of vandalism. So what you're seeing now, as you look at this map of Jamaica, you're seeing an indication of where we really have our major challenges with regard to vandalism and theft. As I mentioned before, St. Catherine is one of our major hotspots, and you'll see the various areas in St. Catherine where we currently feel the greatest impact, and the customers who are in those areas, they know this because they report that to us, and our teams respond to get them as quickly as possible back on the grid to have their services restored. But we also have to make the point that some of these communities are plagued by repeated acts of vandalism. So it is not an individual case where we are able to restore and all is well right after. Sometimes before we even turn on the service after completing the restoration work, the infrastructure, whether it's the cables or the generators, they're stolen again. And I just want to implore everyone, again, this is not just a utility problem or a provider problem. We all have to come together if we intend to take control of this issue that's facing us. And as I close, I just want to say, we appreciate that there are some persons who have concerns about the delivery of their service, and we agree with you. This is totally unacceptable. And while we appreciate that the ban on copper export last year has been useful, we've seen a decline. The fact is that our network is still being preyed on. And more needs to be done. More needs to be done in terms of the support that we get from the residents in the communities. More needs to be done in terms of the information that is passed through the various channels to the police, through to Crime Stop, or to us directly. More needs to be done from the administration in terms of stiffer fines and longer prison sentences for those persons that are brought before the courts, so that it will be a sufficient deterrent and they will not feel inclined to, again, repeat the act. We view this session as another opportunity to continue the dialogue, continue the discussion, and we hope that through our participation here today, that we will be able to pretty much trigger the necessary action that is required to protect the infrastructure that serves the country.
So, thank you, Kayon. So, 51 communities affected, flow customers affected in 51 communities, millions of dollars in restoration costs. Is this sustainable, ladies and gentlemen? Let's hear from Digicel. Let's get the scenario from Digicel through Anthony Barrows, who is Group Head of Field Operations Management at Digicel. Anthony.
Good afternoon, panelists. Good afternoon, members of the public tuning in. I'm Anthony Barrows, and I'm not a public relations practitioner. I simply tell you the facts as they are. I'm going to lead right into it. Our problems are not far different from that which is suffered by flow. Our problems are also exacerbated by the problems suffered by JPSCO. And we are only challenged further because we can't get enough cool water to drink to calm ourselves down, because NWC is also similarly affected. But if I should lead into this, our network, digital network, has numerous acts of vandalism and theft. We have suffered from that. Our best efforts, we continue, despite our best efforts, we have continued to be impacted. What I want people to understand here, though, is that the telecom infrastructure, it's vital to the economy, it's vital to our own development, and we have to collectively fix this. I want to lead into us understanding how best we can protect us, all of us, our Jamaica, our own development, and to see where we go from here and not have a few people benefit from the spoils of having stolen equipment from telecom infrastructure or indeed the grid. I'm going here into just simply showing the damage that is done on location. Now, what you're seeing here, these are Shelton Cabinet. Our base is a radar base station. That is what processes calls on at a cell site and your own experience, the network experience, whether it be Flow, whether it be Digicel. I hope it's Digicel. We expect it to be a great experience any which way. What happens is that people go on, and in order to extract that which is within, usually the batteries, they pillage, they completely pillory our network and go right through. Now, leading from what Kiana said here about the theft, I want to pull it all together to show. What you're seeing on your screen are stolen batteries that were recently recovered by CTOC, which is our partner in trying to combat this problem. These were tracked by the police acting on their own intelligence and delivered right to a scrapyard they were just thrown out of the vehicle. And the second photograph you're looking at, they were packed with normal car batteries, but they were being packaged for export, put around. So the batteries were the real legitimate scrap metal from batteries. Car batteries were being packed around R-based batteries, the telecom batteries. And in the third photo, you'll see how nicely packaged they are, ready to be exported. Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because it is indicative of what we face as a country. Forget the provider. It's what we face as a country, where significant amount of United States dollars are spent buying equipment placed for the use and benefit of Jamaica and Jamaicans. Yes, we are running a business, but ultimately it is we're selling a service that is needed. And what do you have? You have people who are prepared, hustlers I call them, scrap metal. You're taking valuable, brand new equipment or pieces of equipment or components, and they're packaging it and exporting it as scrap. What you're looking at your screen, those red batteries that you see shown there, they're about $80,000 depending on how you address it. 80,000 Jamaican dollars, and it is being sold as scrap, less than $2,000. And it is being exported for that purpose. Now, it is unsustainable as a country. Forget the company. It is unsustainable as a country. This is what we must concentrate. This is what we must look at. This is what we want the government agencies to look at. This is what we want the government agencies regulating the scrap metal trade to look at. How do you tear down telecom infrastructure to support an industry that is selling scrap? If we look right across the length and breadth of Jamaica, I hope you're seeing it clearly. That which you're seeing in green are our cell sites, established at great cost to provide service to all Jamaicans. What you're seeing in red are the areas that have been vandalized as of January 2018. What we're seeing is that what I want you to understand and to experience right here via this medium is to understand this, that at every single juncture, when JPS school goes, and despite JPS school's best intent, you cannot have continuous power supply. And worse, with the theft level spoken of here just earlier, it is even more unreliable because people are interfering with the network. We have fluctuations in service. At every blip, people lose their call setup because there are zero batteries in some sites when they are taken by people. The batteries are there. It should have been a bridge between JPS school going and the generator coming on. So you have constant service. Or the bridge between JPS school going and us going to try and get the generator started because that said generator might have been vandalized by a criminal. That is the difficulty that we face. Or we have to have somebody send fuel to the said cell site to start the generator because the fuel that has been placed there has been stolen. That is the difficulty that we face. And this is not digital. It is not just flow. It is right across. It is simply unacceptable. What you're looking at is your ability to make connections with people, to do business properly, to simply take up a phone and call your loved one. Take up a phone to check to see if your daughter has reached home safely, or your son. These are the simple things, but I want you to understand that every single site shown there in red that has been vandalized since has had to have had their components replaced at significant cost. Now, the cost to the company is one thing. It is a cost to John Public that is more important. The difficulty that they face, the risk that they run of losing business, of losing family members, like Kean said, of reaching out to people. I want everyone to understand it's not a single site that when a single site is attacked, it's not a single site that is affected. If you look at the pictorials here, we're showing where a single hub site, when it goes, it's shown by the red dot. A single site is gone, but all the subtending sites are off air because we have had our infrastructure damaged. A whole site is gone, the subtending sites are off. That is what we want people to understand. Don't look at it as a single incident in a single community by a single friend that you can tolerate. Its impact is way beyond that. So I am addressing all of Jamaica here. I want our own regulatory authorities to understand this. Scrap metal trade is a blight upon us all. Worse if it's not properly regulated. The solar industry also is a big recipient of stolen batteries, and it goes back to a significant thing said here. It goes across all classes, because I will tell you, to establish solar system, no one wants to put the proper outlay costs to buy the batteries and buy the panels, etc. They take a cheap route. But it is not cheap people who are doing it. If you should see some of the recoveries from seriously expensive homes, and they all have stolen batteries there. And the batteries, for most part, are branded Digicel. They know that they're stolen because we don't sell them. Brand new batteries. The issue also is the light penalties for offenders. I will tell you this. We have had significant support from CTOC. That's what was once Flying Squad. ACP Bailey and his team has been significant in support. The difficulty is we spend a lot of time in court with the best wishes of some of the parish judges. I will tell you, we have their sympathy, but the system seems to clog everything. I have been going to court for some matters 5 years now, and it is not resolved. In my mind, it's clear evidence of theft. You have caught someone with it. Up until this point, there is no trial. That emboldens people, because there are times when people are frustrated and don't want to go to court. Not Digicel, we will go all the time. But it takes away from us the ability to do things quickly and recover the assets. And everything, and I'm wrapping up just quickly, everything that remains in court over these 4 years are assets that are retained by the courts as exhibits. They can't be put back in use, even though you have recovered them. That is another challenge for us all. So we'll discuss all the opportunities and all to fix this problem, and I hope that John Public can help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anthony Barrows is from Digicel, and just a reminder that you can send in your questions, your comments, your suggestions via our special WhatsApp number 876-316-2647. That's 876-316-2647, or via our YouTube page if you're joining us live. I know we have a significant number of persons viewing us now, as well as on our Facebook live page. The OUR is very mindful as the regulator of the significant challenges facing the utility sector companies that we regulate as it relates to theft of their services and equipment, to the extent that our own Director General, Anson E. Hewitt, commented on it yesterday via a press release to say that we have been having dialogue with the utility companies about measures that can be taken, as well as we have also made recommendations through, for example, changes in some of our own legislation as a way of helping to cauterize, if not eliminate, this significant, very significant problem. I'm going to throw the first question out to JPS because, as I mentioned legislation, Rashid, I know that there's some legislation in place that deals with when a thief is caught. What kind of fines are we looking at, and is that any way adequate at all?
All right, thanks for that question. And that's a very good question. So recently, and by recent I mean in 2016, the license was amended so that you are punishable by law of up to $5 million in fine and also 2 years imprisonment. And some may say, wow, that is a big deterrent. But what you would find is that in the last 2 years, we have seen, I think, the maximum fine for any individual being about $1.6 million. And what you also find, as Anthony mentioned, is the extensive time and resources spent in carrying out these court cases. And it really pulls on us. And at the end of it, what you will find is, even though a fine is imposed on the person and they may pay it, and it goes into the government consolidated fund, JPS still needs to recover. And that is another process in and of itself. So yes, I mean, we welcome it. It's a far cry from where we're coming from. But what we want is a cooperation now of the parish judges to really, in some instances that are clear-cut, to utilize the option now that we have in stiffer penalties imposed. So it's there for us to take up, but we want to see it being enacted on a lot more.
Charles, what does the legislation say regarding water there?
Well, I wish we had JPSC's levels of penalties.
Yes, I know.
We had some very minimal penalties many years ago. We have struggled long and hard, and the penalties have indeed been recently increased. But whereas the penalties have been increased, it's somewhere in the region of 500,000 that may be charged in a particular instance. But we also have the issue where some of the provisions of the law do not allow us, for example, to charge some persons for some offenses unless we catch them in the very act of doing the connection. And that's not very likely. Although our image and our advertisement does say that we are likely to spot you in the dead of night when you are making a connection, it doesn't happen every day. But we are then left to apply other charges, trespassing on the works of the National Water Commission, for example. And those other options come with less penalty. We also suffer from something of a sympathy for the offenders in the general public. So the utility that catches somebody in the act of stealing from them may be left feeling that we, the utility, are the villains for catching someone stealing our product. There is a need for a social revival, a values reemergence, something to change that would enable us to see that some things are wrong. And if we can't recognize that it is wrong inherently, at least recognize that it is wrong because of the damage it does to all of us. Because as has been stated by all of the other panelists, in the case of water, it threatens the service to others. Persons who steal threaten the service to their neighbors and others in the community. Persons who steal water service threaten the water quality that can be delivered to the rest of the community and puts the community's health at risk.
You said something in your presentation that resonated with me, Charles, and I'm throwing it out to the other panelists as well. You said poverty is not the main factor, the contributing factor to theft.
Absolutely. In our experience,
I thought it was.
We've found that there are many persons who will struggle, are on minimum wage, but they make sure to pay their bills. Yes. We know persons who honor all of their legal obligations, not because they have money to spare, but because they feel it's the dignified and honorable thing to do.
So is that
but
people steal because they feel it's a right?
There are some persons, and in the case of water in particular, we have an issue where people believe, yes, it's a right, but they also believe it's a political gift. I voted in the last election, so that ought to mean that I'm entitled to some water supply service in this area. And historically, Jamaica, land of wood and water, has grown up with too much of a free water culture.
Yes.
And that is creating an environment which makes persons less more inclined to feel free to steal the service from the utility.
Is that the same situation that you're seeing, Rashid?
Yeah, so what you will find is that there are various drivers. One telling tale is that when we look at the affordability issue, JPS has tried in several instances to meet the customers halfway. So we have our community renewal program. We even have a community renewal rate now that if you're on the PATH program, you're eligible for a discounted rate, so to speak. And what you find is that the uptake is not that great. I'll give you an example. We were in a community recently, this is in Kingston and St. Andrew, and we are engaged in the community on a regular basis to get them regularized. And they have flat out rejected it, saying that if it is not free or at a flat rate where they can use, they're not interested. So you find that the propensity of electricity theft is in a large part due to person's mindset, believing that it is, as you say, it's an entitlement to steal. And some persons would have grown up not even seeing what a bill looks like. Yes. And from that whole perspective, persons steal also because they say JPS is a big company, they can absorb it. Or JPS are thieves, so thief from thief. So those are some of the issues we face in the drivers for why persons steal.
And are we seeing the same situation in the telecom sector?
If I should go, my own, there's an element of poverty and that leads some people to steal, but also I think a significant part of what is stolen and resold are sold to people of great means. It means that it is the people of great means that are facilitating and causing, because they've created a demand almost, a market for something, and then you have a foot soldier, the Battlefoot boy, as it was said, to send him to a site to remove some things. But you'll also find high-end vehicles turning up at sites to remove components. So it means it's not a matter of social class or economic class. It's plain thievery.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That is a similar situation for us. You do have the ad hoc moments where, as was said before, where you have a hustler, but a lot of times these hustlers are delivering the stolen material to somebody else that's higher up the chain. And then more times than not, it's the hustler or the foot soldier, as I said, that will get caught. So it's how, as a country, we can come together, how as a country we can ensure that all the players in that particular activity are pretty much identified and brought to justice.
Here's a question, and I think it goes to the heart of what you're discussing now. It's a question via our WhatsApp. Levels of theft of wires, copper, aluminium from utilities seem correlated with the suspension and resumption of the scrap metal industry or the scrap metal trade. Please comment, should the scrap metal industry be investigated again?
Well, I don't think I've made it any clear, any less clear. That there is, so let us be clear. So from some of the recoveries that we have made, I can say scrap metal dealer in Westmoreland, Clarendon, Kingston, St. Anne, for sure. And, well, yes, Clarendon, yes, at least 4 or 5 scrap metal dealers have been caught with goods. And I'm speaking since the most quote-unquote drastic regulations around or enforcement around scrap metal industry. I've had 5 scrap metal dealers caught with batteries and other things taken from cell sites, grounding bars, grounding wires, etc. So it means that if you quote-unquote regulate to a point on paper, but not in practice, then you'll have, like I showed, where you have people packaging for export. And to my mind, all things set for export for scrap metal ought to be inspected. I think that is part of the regulation.
Kayla?
So I agree with that, actually. There is some element of that. The other part of it, though, is that when you think about who are the persons who can generate that kind of product in terms of copper, there are very few entities, really, that will have that volume. And so when you find other persons, traders, dealers, who cannot indicate with any solid evidence how they acquired.
Yes.
There's a big question there, and we're not seeing the follow-through in terms of the action. Of course, we agree that a lot more should be done. Yes, the industry should be investigated. The ban is in place now, and we do see where we've, a slight decline in activity, but nonetheless, the network is still being preyed on.
Another question from WhatsApp is pouring in. Digicel appears to have facts on which solar PV owner or supplier has received stolen batteries. Do they have a name and shame program? Is the legal system inefficient to cauterize the theft?
So to be clear, and I always am guided by lawyers and not by my impulses. Because if I were to be guided by my impulses, I would name a couple of them.
Yes.
But the truth is, we have caught, we have seen people, we have brought to court, and that's the only process that we can follow as it is now. In my mind, I think we would be free to speak about it at the resolution of the matter via the court. Because there's an element of it being, quote-unquote, unfair naming and speaking openly, and you might be interfering with the processes in the court.
But have you had any instances where the court matter has been resolved in your favor and you name and shame?
We haven't named and shamed because 4 years after the fact seems a little...
Because I know JPS does it, I think, to some good effect.
Well, we have
cameras.
similar challenges.
I see TV cameras going in behind your people.
Yeah. What we try and do is really expose persons where we have it. So, I mean, when we're going on our operations, we try as much as possible to get the media involved because we want persons to see and understand what we are facing as a utility. And what we try and do as well is, in our recovery efforts, we would love everybody to be on the grid. So if you're having a genuine challenge that prevents you from being on the grid, that is our first step.
But Rashid, how do you address the issue of persons saying JPS is only targeting the depressed communities because we're low-hanging fruit, but the most significant level of theft is taking place in Uptown?
Okay. Well, I would say that is absolutely not true. JPS right now has a very rigid program that cuts across all strata. So it may appear as if persons are just being targeted in the lower income communities and stuff like that. But what you'll find is that the uproar or the rally around those communities...
I just want us to bring up the JPS had some images that I really want us to go back to. We're talking about some of the creative ways in which people are bypassing electricity. So let's go to that. And yes.
Yeah, so as I was saying, what you'll find is that based on the voice of the low-income or what you might call inner-city communities, the voice is a lot louder. So you'll find that you'll hear it a lot more. Where you find somebody in one of the big establishment and stuff like that, it is normally not as loud in terms of the publicity. So it's not a JPS pushing it, it's really an inherent just based on the nature of the fines and stuff that cause it to be exposed louder or seemingly exposed louder, but I will say at this point in time that that is absolutely not true. So when you look at some of these mechanisms, and I'll go to one in particular, when you look at this, we have found instances where persons, when you look at the type of devices used in the households, you can see that it is very sophisticated. And a clear example, just about a month ago or 3 weeks ago, what we're finding now is that persons who have invested in the solar and the batteries are finding that they're not getting the returns as they had originally projected.
But Rashid,
and they use it as a disguise to steal electricity. So when you think they're switching between JPS and solar, they have been switching between JPS metered and JPS unmetered.
Yeah. Not to tell the secret out in terms of how you can unearth these things, but I find especially the one in the bathroom pretty creative, because who thinks of putting or bypassing a system through? Is that the tissue holder? Or I don't know, but you have systems of detecting.
Yes, we do have systems of detecting it, and that is why we're able to unearth it. One of our biggest challenges that we'll find, though, is prevention of access to premises to find these type of stuff. So we have our sophisticated anti-theft software and analytics that can pinpoint when these things happen and where they happen. But also there's a timing issue. So sometimes we go to the premises is locked, they let out the dogs, nobody comes out, and you have the suspicion, and then we have to go for a warrant and then come back, and at that point in time, you fix up. So those are some of the challenges with it, but we do find them, and it's just a matter of time. But I want the public to know that we're not targeting any specific group. Where theft occurs, all across the length and breadth of the country and across different
Because this does not look like a foreman.
No, it's not. And we have different images and stuff, but of course they have to be vetted first before they can be publicized. Showing big mansions, hot pool, hot tub, all these things. And you would believe that, you won't find any theft there, and we do.
Yes. Absolutely. Let's talk about...
Just one thing. And I understand the economic class that makes certain decisions. I sympathize with my good friend Rashid here, because in some establishments, perhaps it is the employee who did a favor to the employer and put some things in. And it's the same way when you move on to some houses. They say, hey, it's the electrical contractor that said that we should just put up a solar system here, and he put it. I had no idea whatsoever. Even though it's smart, digital, big, screaming. I had no idea that it was not a legitimate thing. But it's always someone else who did it.
Security is a significant issue. Security, especially in terms of residents who are impacted. Perhaps it's even more profound on the part of JPS because we have known of instances where persons get electrocuted. They die. We know of instances where it's just a very significant security issue. Let's talk about that. What are some of the significant security issues that we're faced with as customers when there's theft?
Well, in our instance, the security concerns we have are around our customers not being able to use the services for whatever reason that they need to. So if you're treating with an incident in your community or at home, you're unable to access the help that you need readily. You can't call the police, you can't call the fire brigade, you can't call for an ambulance, and you're pretty much left at the mercy of those persons who would have perpetrated the act. So there is that aspect of it, and then the other part of security is where our network relies on having the full infrastructure in place, and then that now becomes compromised in terms of the service delivery, particularly to businesses. So again, we have that other side of it that we have to treat with. So what we are always mindful of is how can we monitor, how can we better secure the network? So we have taken quite a few steps in terms of securing the network. We have an extensive Watchman program. We have our Security Operations Center where we're monitoring from a security standpoint 24/7. We also have our Regional Network Operations Center as well, where we're looking to see if there's a disruption in service anywhere along the network, just to ensure that from where we sit, we are doing all we can to ensure that the service being provided is reliable, it's consistent, and that our customers are not left pretty much in the dark without access to the services that they need, whether it is to power their businesses or for education purposes or just for your personal connections with your family and friends.
One viewer is saying, if you ask me, their cross is on us who pay because it causes the electricity, the transformer to chip out so frequently, inconveniencing me.
Right, and not only inconvenience in terms of maybe a power outage, but you just spoke about a serious security risk. In some communities, the electricity theft actually causes streetlights to go out. And you will hear from many representatives how impactful it is in certain communities once a streetlight is non-functional. We also have persons, as you said, who have been electrocuted. And it may just blow across, but when you have even 1 or 2 persons be electrocuted, and those are the reported instances, we have had 3 persons electrocuted in the last 2 years, right, with 1 injury. And as I said, reported case. You can just imagine you have lines running through trees, running through rivers, running in extensively, and you can just imagine if it's your child going through and encounter, entangle with any of these wires. And we're really imploring persons that the security is not just for your own personal security or once for you, but you also can create a crime scenario by causing an outage.
But here's a rub. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Here's a rub. Under those circumstances, emergencies, you need help. You can't even take up your phone to make a call because you have also damaged the telecoms infrastructure.
Yeah, sure.
That is where we have dug ourselves, deeply have dug ourselves as a country in certain communities. And we need to really, truly do better.
Absolutely. I was making the point, in addition, that this thing of theft from utilities is a contagious thing. It's not only contagious in terms of, I'm speaking on behalf of Water Commission, in that if you have some persons within the community who are stealing water and not paying for it, chances are, over time, they're going to influence others in the community to do the same. Because why should I be paying when all of my neighbors around me don't pay? But it also is contagious to the extent that it affects other utilities. Persons who steal water are likely to also steal light. And so you have this spreading disease, as it were. It also means it creates a lawless environment. So our security is eventually threatened because we have created a community that does not operate on normal rules, norms. And you create this lawless space. In the end, all of us become physically threatened as much as our future is threatened. Theft from utilities represent a serious problem that needs to be addressed as part of our overall national security strategy. And I think that's part of what we all need to recognize.
Are we having any pockets of success? Maybe, Charles, you can start by taking that. Are you, talk to me about that.
We have had some successes, but they have come at significant cost. And one of the issues we recognize is in order to break the back of theft in many of our communities, it has to be a sustained program, it has to be funded, and it has to be multi-pronged in that we use all the things in the toolbox. You give incentives and give people welcome back packages that says, we know you once were legally on the system, we want you to come back, we'll give you some incentives, we'll make it nice for you. But it also needs to include the other things that says, we are now in a position where using technology, we're more likely to be able to detect any instance of theft. And if you continue down the wrong road, we're going to come after you. So it has to be that kind of holistic program that includes all of those things, and it has to be sustained. We have seen some communities, we have a program we call Social Intervention and Revenue Enhancement Program, CIREP, where we actually go in communities and try and work with people in areas that we know that a high percentage of persons were not paying. And
you've had some success. I have to hurry it along because we have only a few minutes. Unfortunately, time has gone already. Pockets of success.
Well, in our instance, we've had some success. I'd say our biggest success would be in securing the network to just prevent further theft and vandalism in some areas. We successfully lobbied the administration, so we were able to get the temporary ban on copper, but even while that is in place, it is still not enough. And of course, our partnership with Crime Stop, because as we go out and we do our public education efforts, we have our radio program, we're on 2 stations for the month, we have our live chat in social media, and we engage with communities through town hall sessions, etc. As we continue educating our customers and the communities that we serve, we're seeing where we're getting some information in. And we are mindful that there are concerns about confidentiality, etc. And so we direct them to Crime Stop. Okay. We have a partnership with Crime Stop, which pretty much has reward incentives built in as well. So we are seeing where we're getting some information, but we recognize that we still have a lot more work to be done.
For us, we have had significant success, and this is through investment in communities. community relations. That's a big part. We have invested also in technology, significant technology, in order to do some recoveries and all that. But that is secondary in my mind. The most important thing is to engage with the communities and having them understand the need for the service and our need to serve them. That's just the truth. Yeah. And we have had some significant successes.
All right. So very quickly, yes is the short answer. We have seen almost a 1% reduction in the last 2 years, which is significant for where we're coming from. However, it comes at a great cost, as Charles said. So this year alone, we're investing $30 million US. And to put that in context, that's like a quarter of our capital budget, which is supposed to be used to enhance our grid, our services to our customers. So can you imagine when we're pouring, we have to divert all of that funds to deal with electricity theft when we could be changing poles, rehabilitating plants and stuff like that. So on that note, it's the technology that we're investing in that's helping us, as well as everybody has mentioned before, our panelists, that the social intervention has to be a part of that solution for it to be sustainable.
Very important. So I'm hearing from the panel, social intervention, changes in legislation to tighten up on the fines and penalties for theft. Values and attitudes. Charles, you mentioned that, which I think is also very useful, because some persons don't think theft is a bad thing.
Not at all.
We have to work on the values and attitudes of us as a nation. Quicker turnaround time in the courts. I hear you say, Rashid and Anthony, because some of these cases really take too long. So it's very exasperating. And greater community involvement. We want persons to be telling us more about these issues. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Anthony Barrows is Group Head Field Operations Management at Digicel. Keon Mitchell, Director of Corporate Communications and Stakeholder Management. Rashid Anderson, Director of Losses, Operations and Analytics at the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited. And Charles Buchanan, Corporate Public Relations Manager at the National Water Commission. The dialogue continues, ladies and gentlemen. We want to hear more from you. Continue to give us your feedback, communicate with your utility companies wherever you see theft taking place, because all of us, we're in it together. We have to fight together. I'm Elizabeth Bennett Marsh, Public Education Specialist at the Office of Utilities Regulation. Good afternoon.
Stealing is never right. When you steal water, light, and cable lines from the utility companies, the rest of us have to pay the price by way of higher bills. There is risk of fire, personal injury, death, or imprisonment for you and those around you. You set a poor example for your family. How can we make it better if we don't do better? Would you want someone stealing from you? Do the right thing. Just pay for it. A message from the Office of Utilities Regulation.
The OUR is here to regulate the operation. If you want the light and power, your internet and phone, the OUR is here to get you to know your rights.
The OUR is here to regulate how the public utilities operate. Water, light, phone, and internet. The OUR keep them in check.
Contact us at 1-888-CALL-OUR, the Office of Utilities Regulation. OUR, regulating utilities for the benefit of all.